And to Milan I came, to Ambrose the bishop, famed through the whole world as one of the best of men, your devoted servant. That man of God received me as a father would, and welcomed my coming as a good bishop should. And I began to love him. Of course, not at first as a teacher of the truth, for I had entirely despaired of finding that in your church, but as a friendly man. So Augustine introduces us to Bishop Ambrose, who himself was to become a great saint and doctor of the Catholic Church. Now, the term doctor means teacher, literally, and someone who's given the honorific title Doctor of the Church is someone who is seen to have, in his teaching or her teaching, to have had special influence in the development of the Catholic understanding of Christianity. So here we have a very interesting moment in literature where St. Ambrose and St. Augustine, both great Latin doctors of the Church, meet up. So this is actually an historic moment, more historic than Augustine was aware at the time. So Book 5 begins with Augustine's anticipation of and finally meeting with the Manichae bishop Faustus, and Book 5 ends with his encountering Ambrose, the Catholic bishop of Milan. Now this book ending of Book 5 with bishops is clearly intentional. Augustine had gone to Faustus seeking truth, and he only found eloquence, and Augustine went to Ambrose because of Ambrose's fame for eloquence. But Augustine began a journey that led him to truth. And here's what he says about that first encounter with Ambrose. And I studiously listened to him, though not with the right motive, as he preached to the people. I was trying to discover whether his eloquence came up to his reputation, and thus I hung on his words intently. But as to his subject matter, I was only a careless and contemptuous listener. I was delighted with the charm of his speech, which was more erudite, though less cheerful and soothing, than Faustus's style. So he even compares Faustus and Ambrose stylistically, emphasizing again how at the time still style and eloquence were things that struck him deeply, somehow even at that time more profoundly than the question of truth. Now, Augustine has been up to this point not only a teacher of speech and rhetoric, but also a great connoisseur of speech and rhetoric. And for much of his life, up to this point, what really mattered seemed to be just style and persuasiveness. But what ultimately came to strike Augustine about Ambrose was not his style at all. He says, and while I opened my heart to acknowledge how skillfully Ambrose spoke, there also came an awareness of how truly he spoke, but only gradually. First of all, his ideas had already begun to appear to me defensible, and the Catholic faith, for which I supposed that nothing could be said against the onslaught of the Manichaeans, I now realized could be maintained without presumption. So Catholic Christianity came to make a new impression on Augustine. Ambrose, while not yet convincing him, was showing him new ways to look at Christianity and particularly new ways to look at the Bible. The intense biblical literalism of the Manichaees was giving way to new possibilities where the Bible might actually start to speak to Augustine rather than Augustine placing himself in the role of a critic of the Bible. Today, many people think of Christianity as closed-minded. But here, Augustine suggests that Christianity, as he heard it presented by Ambrose, was actually a big mind opener. Augustine's prejudices began to fall by the wayside. His trust in the Manichaees was destroyed, and he quite literally didn't know what to think anymore. Augustine didn't want simply to trust this impressive new thinker and preacher, so he decided to do what lots of philosophers did. He decided to become skeptical. Augustine liked the teachings of some of the philosophers, and he would remain open to these, but he says, I refused to commit the cure of my fainting soul to the philosophers because they were without the saving name of Christ. What Augustine was realizing was that he didn't so much need a good set of ideas. He was instead more like a sick man in need of a cure. Augustine was coming to see that truth was about more than a right way of thinking. Truth must also be about a right way of living, even a right way of believing. And while he felt that he couldn't yet fully trust Ambrose, after all, he'd been burned before, somehow the full truth about our lives in this world must be about more than just ideas and behaviors. It must also be about relationships of trust and love. Before he met Bishop Ambrose, Augustine said he had despaired of finding truth in Christianity. Now Ambrose was opening Augustine to the idea that in Christianity he might find the full truth, including the truth about himself, about God, and about others.